Welcome back, my weirdlings. We have stepped into quarter 2 of Raven's Lorecast, the season of thresholds. If quarter 1 was about origins, about where we come from, quarter 2 is about crossing. Crossing out of what no longer fits, crossing toward what is becoming, crossing the quiet line between survival and alignment. You don't have to be perfect to cross. You only have to be willing. So wherever you're listening from, I'm glad you're here. Because this quarter, we are not chasing perfection. We are practicing becoming. All right, weird ones. Wit, wisdom, witchcraft. Let's begin. Weird ones, come in. Close the door behind you, not because anything is chasing you, but because the world is loud and this circle is deliberate. Take a breath with me, in and out. Good. If you've got a candle nearby, light it. If you don't, imagine one. Magic has never cared about props. It cares about presence. And tonight, you are here. Welcome back to Raven's Lorecast, the home of wit, wisdom, witchcraft. And tonight is something a little different. Tonight, we step into Raven's trick. Now, if you're new here, let me set the tone gently and clearly. Raven's Trick is an ongoing series. It's not a one-time detour. It's not a novelty episode. It's a threshold path. These are foundational lessons, the kind you don't just hear once. They're the kind you return to later, when you've lived more life, when you've lost more, when you've learned more, when you've grown into a new version of yourself and suddenly realize, oh, that episode hits different now. That's the point. Because Raven's Trick isn't here to entertain you. It's here to wake something up, to hand you a lantern, to show you the door, to teach you how to cross a threshold without losing yourself on the other side. So tonight, we're working with one of the oldest, most complicated, most quietly dangerous forces in human life, memory. And I know memory sounds like something soft, like old photographs, like nostalgia, like your favorite song from a decade ago, like the smell of someone you loved. But memory is not always soft. Sometimes memory is a blessing. Sometimes memory is a weapon. Sometimes memory is the reason you survived. And sometimes memory is the thing that keeps you trapped in a moment that ended years ago. Memory is a living thing. It shifts. It edits. It protects. It haunts. And the trick of memory is not that it's fake. The trick is that it can feel like truth, even when it's incomplete. It can feel like certainty, even when it's been shaped by fear. It can feel like identity, even when it's only a wound you've been carrying so long you started calling it who I am. So tonight, we're not here to shame memory. We're not here to worship memory. We're here to learn how it behaves. Because if you don't learn the nature of memory, someone else will rewrite yours for you. And weird ones, that's where the danger lives. So before we go any deeper, I want you to do one small thing with me. Put one hand on your chest, not for drama, for grounding. for truth, for the reminder that you are not just a mind carrying stories. You are a body carrying wisdom. Now breathe in and out. Good. As you exhale, I want you to release the pressure to get this right. You don't have to perfectly remember your past to heal. You don't have to have every detail lined up like evidence in a courtroom. You don't have to justify your pain in order for it to matter. You just have to be willing to look honestly at what lives inside you. And tonight, we're going to do that with care, with boundaries, with respect for your nervous system. Because Raven's trick doesn't demand you bleed for wisdom. It teaches you how to hold truth without being consumed by it. So if you're listening to this while driving, while cleaning, while trying to get through a day that already asked too much of you, you're still welcome here. If you're listening with tears in your eyes and no idea why, you're still welcome here. If you're listening with skepticism in your throat and curiosity in your chest, you're still welcome here. This circle is for the weirdlings, the late bloomers, the seekers, the survivors, the ancestral rememberers, the skeptics with open hearts. And tonight, we're going to talk about memory like it deserves to be talked about. Not as a cute concept, but as a force that shapes your life. So take one more breath with me. In and out. Good. Let's go into the lore. My weirdlings, come closer, because today we're talking about one of the most dangerous magical tools human beings have ever carried. Not fire, not iron, not words. Memory. And I know memory sounds gentle. It sounds like nostalgia, like photo albums, like your grandmother's laugh, like a song that takes you back. But memory is not gentle. Memory is a blade wrapped in velvet. Memory is the thing that can heal you and the thing that can haunt you and the thing that can be weaponized against you so quietly you don't even realize it's happening until you've built a whole life around a lie that isn't yours. So yes, this is Raven's trick, because memory is one of the oldest tricks in the book. And the trick is not that memory is false. The trick is that memory is alive. It moves. It shifts. It edits. It protects. It betrays. It returns at the worst possible moment with a receipt you didn't ask for. And it disappears the one time you need it most. So tonight, I'm not here to tell you, trust your memory like it's a perfect witness. And I'm not here to tell you, don't trust your memory like you're broken. I'm here to tell you the truth. Memory is a creature, and if you don't learn how it behaves, someone else will train it for you. Let's start with the basics. Most of us grow up believing memory works like a camera, like a file, like an objective record, but it doesn't. Memory is more like a storyteller sitting by a fire. It remembers the shape of things, the feeling of things, the meaning of things. And every time you recall a memory, you don't play it back. You rebuild it piece by piece, which means your memory isn't lying to you. It's doing what memory does. It's trying to keep you coherent. It's trying to keep you alive. It's trying to to keep you from shattering. And sometimes that means it smooths edges. Sometimes it fills gaps. Sometimes it hides a thing until you're strong enough to hold it. Sometimes it hands you the memory in fragments, like shards of glass, because that's the only way you can touch it without bleeding out. So when I say the trick of memory, I don't mean memory is fake. I mean memory is crafted. It's a living narrative, and narratives can be shaped by you or by the world. Now let's get real. Trauma does not always make you forget. Sometimes trauma makes you remember too much, too sharply, too vividly, like your body keeps the moment preserved in amber. And you can be standing in your kitchen doing nothing dramatic at all, and suddenly you're not in your kitchen anymore. You're back there, back in the moment you swore you'd never revisit. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system doing its job the only way it knows how. It's trying to keep you safe by keeping you alert. But trauma can also do something else. It can make memory unreliable in ways that feel terrifying. You might forget details, lose timelines, swap sequences, misplace faces, and then you start doubting yourself. And that doubt is where the real danger begins. Because when you doubt yourself enough, you become easy to rewrite, easy to gaslight, easy to control. So hear me. If trauma made your memory weird, that does not mean you're broken. It means your brain prioritized survival over perfect documentation, which is exactly what it was built to do. Let's name the monster. Gaslighting is not someone disagrees with you. Gaslighting is a deliberate attack on your relationship with reality. It's when someone repeatedly insists that what you remember didn't happen, or happened differently, or happened because you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional, too unstable, too much. Gaslighting is memory warfare. It is the slow erosion of your inner witness. And it works because memory is already vulnerable, because memory is already a story we rebuild. So when someone else insists they know your story better than you do, and they repeat it long enough, you start doubting your own bones. And that's the trick. Not that you forgot, but that you stopped trusting the part of you that knew. So if you've ever had to rebuild your confidence in your own perception, if you've ever had to say out loud, like a spell, I know what I saw, I know what I felt, I know what happened, then congratulations, weird one. You've already survived one of the oldest curses in the world. Now let's talk about nostalgia. Because nostalgia is not harmless. Nostalgia is memory with mood lighting. It takes a past moment and makes it glow. It edits out the pain. It softens the edges. It turns survival into the good old days. And sometimes nostalgia is beautiful. Sometimes it's medicine. Sometimes it's how we remember love. But nostalgia can also become a trap, because if you romanticize the past too much, you stop living in the present. You start chasing a version of yourself that only existed because you didn't know better yet. you start missing a time when you were smaller, quieter, easier to control, more acceptable to other people. And that's not because you were happier, it's because you were safer to them. So here's a hard truth. Not every good memory is proof that you should go back. Sometimes it's proof that you survived something you don't want to repeat. Now we go deeper, because memory isn't just personal. Memory is ancestral. Even if you don't know your lineage, even if you don't know the names, even if you don't have the stories, your body carries patterns. Your family carries themes. Your culture carries echoes. There are things you fear that were never yours to begin with. There are things you grieve that you cannot explain. There are things you crave, safety, home, belonging, that feel older than your own lifetime. And whether you call it epigenetics, inherited trauma, collective memory, spiritual lineage, the point is the same. The past lives. And the trick is this. Sometimes we mistake ancestral memory for destiny, but it's not destiny. It's information. It's a map of what happened before you arrived. And your job is not to carry it forever. Your job is to understand it so you can choose what continues. Okay, now let's widen the lens. Because memory isn't just what happens inside a person. Memory is what happens inside a society. History is collective memory, and history is not neutral. History is written by whoever had the power to preserve their version of events, which means entire civilizations have been trained to remember lies. Entire nations have been trained to forget atrocities. Entire cultures have been erased, not only through violence, but through edited memory. And this is why the trick of memory matters so much for witches, seekers, weirdlings, and late bloomers. Because spiritual awakening isn't just candles and crystals. It's also realizing some of what you were taught to remember was designed to keep you obedient. And some of what you were taught to forget was designed to keep someone else in power. So part of becoming a witch, part of becoming awake, is reclaiming memory as a tool of liberation, not as a weapon, not as a purity test, but as a lantern. Now let's get personal again, because sometimes the trick of memory isn't that someone else rewrote your story. Sometimes the trick is that you did. Not because you're wrong, because you were protecting yourself, because you were trying to make meaning, because you were trying to survive. And then one day you realize you have been loyal to a version of yourself that no longer exists. You have been living inside an old wound like it's a home. You have been rehearsing the same betrayal, the same humiliation, the same heartbreak until your nervous system thinks pain is your identity and memory becomes a shrine, not to your growth, to your suffering. So here's the question Ostera asked last week, and Raven's Trick asks this week. What if you're allowed to remember without reliving? What if you can honor what happened without staying trapped in it? Let's clear something up. Forgiveness is not amnesia. Forgiveness is not pretending it didn't happen. Forgiveness is not keeping the peace while you rot from the inside. Forgiveness, when it's real, is a boundary. It's the decision to stop letting a past harm keep renting space in your future. But forgetting is sometimes what the world demands of victims so the perpetrators can stay comfortable. So no, you don't owe anyone forgetfulness. You owe yourself freedom. And freedom begins with telling the truth, even if only to yourself. So what do we do with all of this? We don't demonize memory. We don't worship memory. We learn to work with it like a witch works with fire, with respect, with skill, with boundaries. Here are the 3 rules I want you to keep. 1, memory is information, not identity. 2, memory is emotional truth, not always chronological truth. 3, memory can be honored without being obeyed. You are allowed to remember what happened, and you are allowed to refuse to live there. You are allowed to carry the lesson and leave the wound behind. And this is where we bring it home, because this episode is called The Trick of Memory. But the deeper truth is, memory is also the path back to sovereignty. When you remember who you are, the world loses its grip. When you remember what you survived, shame loses its voice. When you remember what you deserve, you stop negotiating with crumbs. When you remember your own worth, you stop begging for permission to exist. That's the crown. That's the royalty. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because you belong to yourself again. And weird ones, that is the most powerful magic I know. So now we're going to look up, because tonight's sky is going to mirror everything we just named. A bright moon in Leo, a royal star, Regulus, at the heart of the lion. And in some places, the moon will cover it briefly, like a cosmic reminder that even truth can disappear for a moment without being gone. Let's talk about what's happening overhead and what it asks us to remember. All right, bright ones, let's look up, because tonight's sky is doing something beautifully specific, and it's the kind of celestial moment that feels like a message even if you don't believe the universe sends messages. On March 29th, 2026, the night is ruled by a waxing gibbous moon, bright, nearly full, and absolutely impossible to ignore. She's sitting at about 88% illumination, rising in the afternoon and staying with us for most of the night, like she has a point to make. And she does. Because tonight, the moon drifts into close company with a star that has been mythologized for centuries. Regulus, the heart of the lion, the royal star, the bright, steady eye of Leo in the sky. And the moon doesn't just pass near it. For some parts of the world, Europe, Africa, and Asia, the moon will actually occult Regulus, meaning she will pass in front of it and temporarily hide it from view. Let that land for a second. A royal star, hidden behind the face of the moon. That's not just astronomy. That's a metaphor with teeth. and it fits tonight's theme perfectly. Memory, what it reveals, what it hides, what it crowns, what it edits, what it lets us keep, and what it quietly steals. With the moon in Leo, the emotional tone of the night is not subtle. Leo is heart-centered. Leo is identity. Leo is the part of you that says, "This is who I am." Not who you were trained to be, not who you became to survive, not who you performed to stay safe, but who you are when the lights come on and you stop apologizing for existing. A waxing gibbous moon is a building phase, a gathering phase, a nearly there moment. It's the moon saying, we are approaching fullness. We are approaching truth. We are approaching the part where you can't pretend you didn't see it. And in Leo, that truth tends to be personal. It tends to touch the heart. It tends to drag your real self out from behind the curtain and say, "Come on then, be seen." Regulus is one of the brightest stars in the sky and one of the most storied. It sits in the constellation Leo, and its name comes from the Latin for little king, a royal star associated across time with leadership, sovereignty, power, and the idea of the crowned self. But here's the thing, bright ones. Royalty isn't always about thrones. Sometimes royalty is about self-possession. Sometimes it's about the moment you stop letting other people rewrite your story. Sometimes it's about remembering who you were before the world got its hands on you. And tonight, the moon meets Regulus like she's checking in with the heart of the lion and asking, do you remember yourself? Do you remember what you wanted? Do you remember what you promised? Do you remember what you survived? And then for some of us, she covers it. Not forever, just long enough to remind us, even the brightest truths can be hidden for a time. Even the heart of the lion can disappear behind a passing shadow. That doesn't mean it's gone. It means it's behind the veil. And sometimes memory works exactly like that. Let's talk about what an occultation feels like. Astronomically, it's straightforward. The moon passes in front of a star, and from your viewpoint, the star vanishes. But emotionally, it's eerie. One moment it's there, the next moment it's not. And that's the trick of memory, isn't it? One moment you're certain, the next moment the details blur. One moment you're holding a story like it's solid. The next moment you're realizing parts of it are missing. Not because you're broken, because you're human. Memory is not a recording. It's a living thing. It changes shape every time you touch it. And tonight's sky gives us a clean visual for that truth. Even what is real can be temporarily obscured. Even what is bright can vanish behind the moon. Even what is known can slip out of sight. And still, it exists. Still. The sun is in Aries, early in the sign, which means we're still in the ignition phase of the astrological year. Aries energy is about initiation, courage, momentum, identity, beginning again with your whole chest. And when the sun is in Aries while the moon is in Leo, the vibe is fire speaking to fire. This is not a quiet week. This is not a sit still and wait week. This is a remember who you are and act like it week. But not in a performative way, in a sovereign way. Mercury is in Pisces right now. Direct, yes, but still moving slowly after the retrograde period that ended around March 20th. Mercury in Pisces doesn't think like a spreadsheet. It thinks like water. It remembers through sensation, through emotion, through dreams, through the way a smell can crack open a door in your mind and suddenly you're 8 years old again. So if you've been feeling foggy, tender, or strangely reflective lately, that's not you falling behind. That's Mercury in Pisces doing what it does, pulling up the emotional archive, not to punish you, to teach you, to remind you what still needs gentleness, to show you what you've outgrown. Venus is at the final degree of Aries, 29 degrees, preparing to move into Taurus on March 30th. And the 29th degree is a threshold degree. It's the last chance lesson degree. Venus in Aries is a bold love, fast love, direct desire. The part of you that wants what it wants and doesn't want to apologize for it. But as Venus prepares to enter Taurus, the energy shifts toward steadiness, devotion, embodiment, pleasure, worth, the kind of love that lasts. So if you've been asking yourself questions like, what do I want now? What do I deserve now? What am I no longer willing to beg for? Yeah, that's the Venus threshold talking. And it pairs beautifully with the trick of memory because it asks, are you remembering your worth or are you living like you forgot it? Jupiter is bright in Gemini, high in the evening sky, the easiest planet to spot besides the moon. And Jupiter in Gemini expands through thought, language, story, learning, reframing, and curiosity, which means the trick of memory isn't just about what happened. It's about what you believe happened. It's about what story you're telling yourself about your past, and whether that story is liberating you or trapping you. Because memory isn't just a vault, it's a narrative engine. And Jupiter in Gemini says, you can rewrite the meaning without rewriting the truth. Saturn is in early Aries. Neptune is also in early Aries, wide conjunction territory, not exact, but present. And that combination is powerful in a trick episode because it holds two forces. Saturn, structure, responsibility, reality, boundaries. Neptune, spirit, longing, dreams, myth, disillusion. Together, they ask, what do you believe? And what are you building? What dream is real enough to deserve structure? And what fantasy needs to be released because it's costing you your life? That's not woo, that's wisdom. So here's the spell the sky is casting on March 29th. A bright moon in Leo says, your identity matters. Regulus says, your sovereignty matters. The occultation says, even truth can vanish temporarily, but it still exists. Mercury in Pisces says, memory is emotional, not just factual. Venus at the Aries threshold says, remember your worth. Jupiter in Gemini says, watch the story you tell yourself. Saturn and Neptune in Aries say, build something real from what you believe. So if you want a single sentence to carry into the rest of this episode, let it be this: I will not confuse my memory with my prison. I will use it as my map. All right, bright ones, we've looked up. Now let's bring that sky down into the body, into the daily, into the practical, because that's what Raven's trick is for. All right, weirdlings, welcome to the part of the ritual where remembering becomes edible. And if the last segment was the sky reminding us that memory can vanish and return, that truth can be obscured without being erased, then this is where we bring that lesson down into the body. Because memory isn't just a thought. It's a taste, a scent, a tightening in the chest, a sudden warmth behind the eyes, a song that turns you into someone you used to be. So tonight, the kitchen altar isn't about sweetness or comfort. It's about depth, salt, bitterness, brightness, warmth. The flavors memory is actually made of. We're making a remembering tamponade, a dish that tastes like the past waking up, like stories resurfacing, like truth sharpening itself on your tongue. Because tamponade is, at its heart, an act of preservation. Olives cured in salt and thyme, garlic mellowed by crushing, herbs dried until their scent can resurrect an entire season. It's the perfect food for a night like this. So, let's begin. First, the ingredients that remember. You'll need 1 cup Kalamata olives pitted, 1/2 cup green olives, 2 to 3 cloves of garlic, 1 tablespoon capers, the zest of 1 lemon, 1 to 2 tablespoons fresh thyme leaves, a 1/4 cup good olive oil, black pepper to taste, a small squeeze of lemon juice, and optionally, a pinch of Aleppo pepper if you really like some spice. And my weird ones, every single ingredient here is a memory keeper. Olives remember the heat of the sun and the patience of curing. Garlic remembers every kitchen it's ever been crushed in. Capers remember the sea. Thyme remembers grief and healing. It was used in ancient funerary rites and in convalescent broths. Olive oil remembers every hand that tended the grove. Lemon zest remembers light even when your body forgets what joy tastes like. Nothing here is forgetful. This is a spell of recollection. Now, you can make this in a food processor if you want convenience, but if you want magic, use a mortar and pestle. There is something ancient and clarifying about the act of crushing olives by hand, the rhythm, the weight, the grounding of it. Add your olives and capers to the bowl. Feel their firmness. Feel how they resist, because memory always resists before it releases. Begin crushing slowly. You're not punishing the olives. You're coaxing them open. As you crush, speak. What I carry, I acknowledge. What I acknowledge, I can transform. Add your garlic. Crush again. Let the scent rise, sharp, insistent, impossible to ignore. The past often announces itself this way. Fold in your thyme. Let its aroma soften the moment. Add the lemon zest last, brightening the mixture like a revelation. Now slowly drizzle in the olive oil until the texture becomes glossy, cohesive, willing, because memory doesn't become coherent all at once. It emulsifies. Now taste it. Really taste it. The brine rings like old tears. The garlic smolders like old anger. The lemon lifts like old laughter resurfacing. The thyme settles like a held breath finally released. And the olive oil? That's the part that helps everything slide down gently. This tamponade is not meant to be polite. It is meant to be honest, because food, like memory, isn't always sweet. Sometimes the thing you need to taste is the thing that makes you sit up straighter and say, "Oh, I remember this." Serve it on toasted gluten-free bread or crisp vegetables. Spread it thick. Let it stain your tongue with truth. Before you eat, place your hands around the bowl. Feel the warmth of your palms. Feel the hum of your own electricity. Feel the presence of every memory that shaped you, the ones that made you, the ones that broke you, the ones you survived. Say, "I remember what matters. I release what harms. I reclaim what was lost." Take one bite. Let it ground you. Let it open a door. Let it sharpen your knowing. Let it soothe your nervous system with fat, salt, and heat. Let it anchor you to the present moment so you can engage with the past safely. This is culinary reconsolidation. This is edible shadow work. This is somatic spell work disguised as a snack. And it is perfect for a raven's trick. Tamponade keeps well. In fact, like memory, it deepens overnight. Use leftovers for spreading on toast before journaling, stirring into warm rice to ground a chaotic day, topping roasted vegetables when you need clarity, eating with crackers during emotional processing, pairing with herbal tea during ancestral work. Each bite is a reminder. You are allowed to reinterpret the past in ways that nourish the present. This is the trick of memory, made delicious. Weirdlings, take a breath with me. In and out. Good. Now let's close this circle the way Raven's trick always asks us to. Not with noise, with clarity. Tonight we walked through one of the oldest doorways there is, memory. And we did it without turning it into a fairy tale. We didn't pretend memory is perfect. We didn't pretend it's harmless. We didn't pretend it's something you can control with sheer willpower. We told the truth. Memory is alive. It edits, it protects, it shifts shape in your hands. It returns when you least expect it, and it disappears at the exact moment you want proof. And if that scares you, it makes sense, because a living thing can't be controlled the way an object can. But here's the part I want you to carry out of this episode like a lantern. You don't have to fear memory to be wise about it. You don't have to obey every recollection like it's a commandment. You don't have to distrust yourself into silence. You don't have to live like your past is the only authority in your life. You are allowed to remember without being consumed. You are allowed to honor what happened without building your home inside it. You are allowed to hold the truth without bleeding yourself dry to prove it. Because this is the trick. Memory will try to convince you it is your identity, but it isn't. Memory is information. Memory is sensation. Memory is meaning. And you are the one who gets to decide what it becomes. Now, tonight's sky gave us a perfect mirror, a bright moon in Leo, a royal star, Regulus, the heart of the lion. And in some places, the moon covered that star for a time, not forever, just long enough to remind us, even the brightest truths can be hidden. Even the clearest self can be obscured. Even the crown can disappear behind a passing shadow. But that doesn't mean it's gone. It means it's behind the veil. And weird ones, that's your reminder for the days when you feel like you've lost yourself. You haven't. You're just in a moment where the light is covered. So here is your closing spell. Simple, practical, and real. I want you to repeat this after me. I remember what matters. I release what harms. I reclaim what was lost. And now the final line, the one that turns memory from a cage into a key. I will not confuse my memory with my prison. I will use it as my map. Because the purpose of remembering is not punishment, it's orientation. It's the ability to say, this happened. I survived it. I learned. I am still here. And now I choose what happens next. That is sovereignty. That is the crown returning to the rightful ruler, not the past. Not the people who tried to rewrite you. Not the versions of you that existed only to be tolerated. You. And if you're listening to this and thinking, Raven, I don't know how to trust myself again, then let me say it plainly. Start small. Trust yourself about one thing today, one boundary, one truth, one memory you refuse to let someone else distort. And if all you can do is whisper, I know what I felt, that's enough. That's a beginning. And Raven's Trick is built for beginnings because this series is ongoing and these are foundational lessons. Not because you're behind, but because you're becoming. So come back to these episodes when you need them. Re-listen when life changes you. Return when you're ready for the next threshold. The door will still be here. All right, my weirdlings, take one last breath with me. In and out. Good. May your remembering be honest. May your healing be gentle. May your boundaries be blessed. May your story belong to you again. This has been Raven's Lorecast, Raven's Trick, the trick of memory. And I'll see you next time at the threshold. If tonight stirred something in you, if a story caught, if a ritual settled into your bones, if a truth followed you into the quiet, that's the work. Quarter 2 is about thresholds, and thresholds aren't destinations, they're decisions. If you'd like to keep walking with me between episodes, you can find Raven's Lorecast on Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitter, Pinterest, and TikTok. You can find me on Instagram at ravens_lore_cast. These are where the conversation continues, the visuals unfold, and the circle stays open. If you're called to go even deeper, the Patreon door is there when you're ready. No pressure, no chasing. Just another threshold you can step through when it feels true. Until next time, wit, wisdom, witchcraft. See you at the doorway, my weirdlings.